afternoon. My name is Charan and I'm a director with the KPMG Risk Consulting Practice. Uh, Let me start by welcoming the virtual audience. It's great to have you all here. And thanks and welcome to all of our esteemed panelists as well. We hope to have an interesting and interactive panel discussion today. Uh, Our world has changed in 2020. As we all are aware, the ramifications of COVID-19 are still trickling in. But one thing is quite clear that the industries that have been focusing on digital transformation led by cloud uh, stand a better chance of recovering and surviving than the others. Most businesses are turning to online to provide services during these times. Even schools and colleges have started providing online classes. With such innovations, both businesses big and small are leveraging the power of cloud to reimagine the way they service their customers. Cloud has proven its ability to respond with speed and while being robust as well. Uh, well, the pace of adoption of cloud is increasing, so the number of cyber attacks and breaches that we get to hear on cloud. Some of the key threats that we've been witnessing are related to data breaches, denial of service attacks, insider threats, insecure applications, insecure configuration of cloud, and many more. And there have been a number of big businesses that have fallen prey to cyber attacks recently. Today, we will be focusing on aspects related to measuring cybersecurity in the cloud, aspects to look for when organizations move to cloud, how's the shared responsibility model in cloud, and how does responsibilities change when we're specifically talking about cyber in the cloud. We're also going to look at monitoring compliance in the cloud and how one should look at aspects related to regulatory compliance and so on. I have little doubt that this group that we have today will lead us through a lively and thought-provoking discussion. With no further ado, let me dive into the discussion. So, as management guru Peter Drucker is often quoted with the saying, "You cannot improve what you cannot measure." Uh, uh, we would like to understand from Dr. Basuu, let me put this question to you first, on how can one go about measuring cybersecurity in general and in the cloud?
Thank you, Chef, and very good afternoon to all. When it is coming to measuring the effectiveness of the any control through our assessment, it could be a normal in-house scenario or a cloud scenario. There are certain things we need to focus. We should have a proper strategy to measure that. Proper strategy of cyber related control assessment or security related control assessment, which needs to be part of your overall information security or cyber security strategy. When it is coming to form the control, focus is more on what kind of objective you would like to get out of that particular control. Now, for that, obviously, you have a certain set of framework which is followed by the organization and match those control outcome with the framework and the business security requirement. Then first level of assessment always go with the control design assessment. First thing is very important, the control which has been designed to protect certain set of resources is effectively working or not. For that purpose, it is very important that we know the asset which we are protecting. This asset could be our data, the platform which is hosting that data, the application we are using, the backend we are using. Also, it is very important to understand the processes we are using to handle that, as well as the people. The, the reason is we may have the best technology and the best platform in place, but there is a process loophole which can be a major threat for the entire data, or could be ignorance of a person could lead to a major challenge. Considering that, we need to look at end-to-end requirement, followed by what are the regulatory assessment coming, what are the major critical need of business security, frame the assessment for a strategy for the year accordingly. First, do a control design assessment. If the design assessment outcome is uh, acceptable, uh, then you can go and start the efficiency assessment. Wherever there is a major failure in the design assessment, better way to address that, first rectify the design and then go for a control efficiency assessment. Now, when it is coming to the control efficiency assessment, there is an objective for every control. That control is having certain responsibility. Means when we are commissioning a control to protect a set of requirement could be or your data, your infrastructure, your network, your endpoint, or your connectivity. So what is this objective? A control should have a responsibility accordingly when we are assessing that control. So any control is having a primary responsibility, which is the major functionality of the control, and we need to look at that the control is able to achieve that. So could be this 40 to 60% of the effectiveness of the control needs to be assessed based on the primary responsibility. While coming to the next part of the assessment, it is the secondary responsibility of the control. So apart from the primary responsibility, what are the secondary responsibility this control is performing, and how effectively we are able to achieve that. But some cases, even we see that at overall level, a control is actually giving us the protection beyond the primary and secondary objective which we are trying to achieve. So that is the tertiary objective of the control. So assessment generally good to limit between primary, secondary, and tertiary control, because if we are going further, there is a chance or a high chance that the control efficiency itself is going to be get diluted. So we may focus on this three part and then see that how effectively it is working. Also, it is important that people and the process which are actually designed to support the efficiencies of the control is aligned with the control objective. They are not process should not be hindrance while that particular control is performing the activity. Also, the people are aware about the requirement of the control, because what will happen sometime if the person who is managing the control is not aware about the control requirement, what is the primary, secondary, and tertiary role of the control, they may at admin level they may try to use the same control to protect some other asset, and immediately the purpose of the control is going to be get diluted. So it is very important that we make the people aware, we give them the role-based training, give them the understanding why this control is commissioned. Also, while conducting this activity, as I mentioned, that it should be aligned with the organizational business security need first, as well as the regulatory need. We may need to also look at that control is not only measurable or monitorable, also it is giving us the footprint or the evidences which is required to be furnished to the regulator. Because I strongly believe that regulatory outcome of the control should come as a one of the outcome of a effective security implementation, not a checklist item that I have this control is placed, because that doesn't make any sense for the organization. Rather than that is going to create a false sense of security and imposing more risks on the organization. So considering that, we can put all the things in place, also ensure that the set of regulatory requirement you have, the kind of report you need to generate during the regulatory audit, you are not going to, just search for them. During day-to-day functionality of the control, they are actually giving those outcome also in a very effective fashion. Also, it is very important that all the assets of the organization and their control is effectively synced with each other. So any assessment, as I mentioned, that design gap assessment, then we go to the control efficiency assessment. Now, what we are going to start with after design gap assessment, technically, we next place, it is not simply, go and start assessing the control. It is more on the assessing on the architectural part. The architecture assessment is very important for the organization, because that is gave us the complete sense of security portfolio, which is technically implemented in place. Once that is done, then we go and start assessing the control. So it is a compact process. Also, while we are doing it, for a big organization, sometimes it is very big challenge. What would be frequency of my control assessment, right? So you need to have a very clear strategy based on the infrastructure control or the other control which is directly protecting your data, or some other aspect is very clear, very clear understanding what you are protecting. Based on that, we need to put that timeline, what would be the frequency of that assessment. Also, we need to ensure that what is the sample size of that assessment, because we may not be able to, take the entire stuff in every aspect. And wherever critical control are there, they need to be more frequently assessed from the assessment perspective. Also, it is very important that while we are assessing, if we found that resources protected by multiple control with the same primary or secondary responsibility or tertiary responsibility, it is the responsibility of the assessor to report it back, stating that you have a multiple control which is actually trying to protect a same resource, and this multiple control is actually in the same level, not in different level, which is actually creating a layer defense. So how, and also provide the input that which one is the most effective, and if there is some so organization can take call and reduce the overhead of the control maintenance and put effective control in place. Also, if there is any control which is not efficient, recommend to retire those control and put the new control in place. And more importantly, when we are in a bigger size, we are looking at the bigger size organization, some country or some particular geography may deploy a control feature and maintain the control in a more effective way, identify those and globalize those practices and globalize those control. So this is an end-to-end requirement of the organization, and a control assessment is not going to restrict within the organizational boundary only. We need to also see that what are the touch point of our data, what are the touch point of our network with our counterpart, that is our partner network or some other area, or somebody providing us the service, up to what level, what kind of access they are having. Accordingly, we need to also look at their network part while they are connecting us. How much, how much we are have a protection uh, in place. Also, we need to work with our partner to understand how they are protecting their area, and that is going to build an overall aura of protection for the organization. So assessment is a end-to-end requirement of the organization. It's not a checklist that I have a control in place. Yes, it is in place. I need a full report out of this control to report back to regulator. Yes, it is in place. No, it is more on the efficiency part of the control.
Thank
Over
you,
to
ma'am. I think those are wonderful insights coming in. Some of the key takeaways that I see are, having a clear strategy in place in terms of how you are going to measure your cybersecurity assessment, and then, looking at it holistically from a people process technology standpoint, and having a clear approach in terms of your control design and measurement framework as well. So, wonderful insights coming there. Uh, Let me pose a question to you, Mr. Desai. So, what we see from the discussion with Dr. Basuu is that a structured approach can help in better execution of cloud security strategy. So, wanted to get your views in terms of what are the steps that you see are involved in an approach towards improving cloud security.
Sure. Thank you, and a very good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Dr. Lopa. You actually set the context for by ensuring that any organization who actually moves towards the typical cloud strategy, it is all about the assessment that actually has a lot of focus. Uh, as a part of while the organization move towards cloud, the structured way to look upon is very simple. Uh, okay, so let me touch upon to the basic touch points. First is the securing the cloud environment and the data content in it. Only 2 pointers. Now, when we say 2 pointers, data at rest, data in motion. So the encryption while the data is in motion, while being accessed at the endpoints, and the data at rest within the cloud environment. Now, maintaining the encryption again, that's very critical and crucial when it comes to the database in particular. Encryption when the data being accessed, and also encryption, or I would say the security measures at the endpoints. When I say endpoints, it can be so while we talk about the typical application where we are moving towards the applications, apps, mobile apps. So the enterprise mobile mobility management, the EMM, that actually plays a very vital role. Um so this takes care of the data in rest in and data in motion. Apart from that, the typical access management. So the CASB, so the cloud access security broker. So that plays a very vital role in this. It actually helps in setting the policy in about policy and controls about the data access, the data being accessed over cloud. Second, it also gives the insights about what is being and who is accessing the data. So that's very critical. Now, when you talk about data being accessed and the insights about data being accessed over cloud, this actually plays very vital role. Who can access what data and up to what extent? This also is also very much linked to the cloud monitoring, or I would say the security monitoring aspects. And again, this goes to very basic fundamentals about the accessibility management and the monitoring part. So any data which is not supposed to be accessed by the wrong individuals, or not the right people, or the right endpoints, should be an alert and should be an action item. So this is also very critical when while paving the structured path toward the cloud security assessment. This also includes. So while I'm considering that the basic hygiene of the proper patching mechanism, and the endpoint securing the endpoints with the maybe the EDRs, or maybe along with the anti-malware solutions on the endpoints. So I understand these are basics which should be and will be taken care by the organizations. But apart from that, there are, while you move towards cloud, there are cloud threat monitoring and the malware threat protection solutions available, which can be looked upon, and which also helps to monitor the data that is being accessed and that is being I would say again addressed as in and in motion. Well, so these were just a high level pointers, or I would say inputs, while as we move towards the cloud, and if we have to look upon, or rather touch upon the cloud security aspects in just in particular, these are very basic fundamental. Again, the most critical on the data privacy part, where the data is lying on cloud. Now there are, as we all know, there are regulations. I would say data privacy regulations with respect to different countries or different continents. So now this also plays a very vital role when you have a large organization spread across various different countries, or I would say a multinational organization. So just to summarize, and to ensure that a kind of a basic checklist taken care as a part of the security structured security approach, uh, security of the cloud environment, the data contained in that, the data in rest, the data in motion, the encryption part, the data privacy regulations part, uh, CASB, so the access management of the data being accessed, and who is accessing and what data, and the monitoring of the overall threat I would say malware threat monitoring part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. I think those are wonderful insights and a lot of points for us to ponder on in terms of technologies and cybersecurity considerations that one needs to look at from a cloud standpoint. Uh, for organizations, it is usually a big step in terms of moving to cloud. So let me bring in Mr. Batra here to say what, according to you, are some of these considerations from a cybersecurity standpoint that an organization needs to look at before taking this plunge into cloud.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. I think it's want to build your architecture and the data, the security, the big man. So it's like, when you are going for a new cloud as a strategy and workload in the cloud. So those things are the first thing everyone should take care of. But as you are portraying, from the migration perspective, and if I need to migrate my current workload or the current environment which I have to the cloud, so it requires in itself a different strategy. So it's not about how it will be secure it will be what is my scope, what I want to achieve, what I want to move to the cloud, and when I'm talking about the what. So I'll just give you some of the insights, like IT, some basic IT operation check, because right now I have on-prime system. You plan that you want to go to cloud. So is your IT inventory up to date? And is your matrix or the mapping is up to date? Because I'll tell you, give an example. So I have been into many of the migration. I have been involved. I've worked with different organizations and try to understand how they are planning to move to the cloud. Now generally when you design, it's different subnets. You have web tier, you have database, you have infrastructure tier, and when you are putting the new workload, it's quite strategically it's easy to put in and streamline. But when you are trying to put on-prime workload, I'll give you an example. So there, like there's a web application which is connected to one particular database. And when you try to say that, okay, you want to move that database is particularly connected to another 6 web applications. And then those another 6 web applications are then tied up with another database. So those are the complex infrastructure which this time almost on-prem every organization. And when you need to plan that I want to move to the cloud and it's not new and your current infrastructure you want to move, which server will go first, which will go second, and you can't just plan like, okay, I have these 50 servers and put it in cloud, and from tomorrow, that Friday business is down, Monday morning when they come, they switch on and everything is working, wow, and it's gaga. It's not going to happen. So the planning for that, and knowing your inventory and knowing your assets and listing that down is the very first step, which 90% organization fails before migrating over there. The second issue, or the which I will talk about the migration, you need to know the connectivity, the ports, because generally when you talk about the old traditional on-prem structure, you have DMZ, then you have internal environment and the things. But when you are moving to cloud these days, with the concepts like zero trust, micro segmentation, no one is actually making a DMZ. It's like, with the new security network security groups or application security group, they are making the new micro segmentation, and each and every component of your application on infrastructure is sitting aside and not talking to each other. Are you aware that your which application internally talking to which other component of your system? So that is the second issue which I have found that people are not doing. And third is the skill set. On-prem is different because when you have a network, you have physical devices, you have boundaries defined. But when you move to cloud, you don't have access to any of the physical stuff. You don't know what your boundaries are, where your data is going. But do you have skill set or the people who actually can put the configuration right in a particular manner? Because small in a cloud, a small admin doing a small configurational issue, just making a VNet instead of private to public, and can expose all your data to the internet. Just a small solution, and you can go back and see the previous cases, which like I will not take the cloud or the organization name, but most of the data breaches which has happened from cloud are small configuration issues. But that's not the case in the on-prem environment. So the skill set which is required to manage on-prem and to manage the cloud environment is totally different. You can't rely that who's managing your on-prem, the same team will take it to cloud and start managing the next day. You have to plan for that training, that skill set, and people need to learn cloud environment from each and every aspect. And it's not a physical network, it's a SD, and it's a IAM is a Active Directory. You see, I can talk on many practical issues, but these are the three major which I see when you are migrating and then follow.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. I think one of the key takeaways for me is cloud is different from on-premise. Don't treat it the same way. It requires different skills. So as a follow-on, I think shared responsibility model is often touted as fundamental to how cybersecurity is dealt with in the cloud. So Dr. Basu, let me get back to you on how do you see the role of cloud service provider versus the cloud consumer in managing cybersecurity? Dr. Basu, you're on mute.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
As Gaurav very correctly mentioned that cloud environment is different from your on-prem environment. So we need to look at from a different perspective. It is not putting the same security over the cloud which we are having inside the in-house environment, but it is more on what is the objective of those security requirement while the data is inside the environment, and where you are taking it out, we need to see the same requirement are in place, but from an objective perspective, not from a control perspective, because the controls are different. Now, how to achieve it? So, cloud, who is responsible for managing the overall security over the cloud is a big question, and it is a shared responsibility of the cloud provider and the adopter of the cloud, that is the consumer of the cloud. Now, we need to be very clear on one thing. Though you are sending your data to a cloud environment and cloud provider taking some responsibility as per the contractual thing, but we need to remember that data belongs to the organization, and organization is responsible for overall security of the data, which cannot be passed to anyone. Legally, you are liable for that. Now, what will happen when we are taking the data in the cloud environment? First of all, we need to see that what is that, right? We are using from cloud as infrastructure, cloud as a service, cloud as a platform, cloud as a security services. So there are lots of ways, we can adopt the cloud. It is not a single and kind of a standard thing for everyone. Every requirement is different. Accordingly, we need to opt for the cloud services. While opting for the services, the shared responsibility between the cloud provider and the cloud acquirer get changed. Though those are very nicely standardized, but it is very important for us to read those areas to see that what is the sole responsibility of the cloud provider and how cloud provider is performing that and sending that communication back to the organization that we are maintaining this part of the security, and if there is any challenge to that part, how what is the mechanism to communicate back and forth. Second area is shared responsibility. There is a part of security responsibility which is take care by the cloud provider remaining with the organization. So these two responsibility need to be seen properly, and how we can perform that responsibility from both the side to build a overall effective security uh, platform, secure platform or secure infrastructure or services, whatever is in place. And very important, and next is a solo responsibility of cloud acquirer. So there you need to come out with the requirement what you need to perform. Also, there is a dependency on the cloud provider, how you can work back and forth with the cloud provider on those areas if any requirement is there, not in every area. That is very important. As very clearly mentioned by Gaurav, one misconfiguration lead to a disaster in cloud because your entire data will be exposed. So how you will monitor those, how effectively you are controlling the access. It could be a privileged access, it could be a normal access to the users. So how effectively you are actually provisioning those is very important. Also, in case of any problem or any disaster, how you are going to collaborate with them. Is that collaborative platform in place that both of you can work together to effectively handle that? Third, but it is very important in case there is any breach happen, you need the third party to perform the forensics on the environment. Who are those third parties? Have you identified? Or your cloud provider, if they have somebody in place, are you okay with that? So that is very important, because if something happen and you don't have plan and strategy in place, it is very difficult to handle. So basically, you need to be very clear what is the responsibility of your cloud provider, what is your shared responsibility, what is your sole responsibility. Once this is clear for you, what is the interdependency both the parties is having, and what would be the engagement model to handle that area. Once that is identified, you can clearly put the security controls and the security architecture in place that is effectively going to protect the overall requirement of the organization. And you should have a identified framework, because it should not happen you have a set of framework which is no, and the provider is if you are go for a cloud as a service, provider is using a different framework, right? Could be possible mapping those and requirement with each other, because basically ultimate aim is to protect the environment, protect the data, and maturity control could be possibly seen. Even if we look at the simple SOX requirement, right? The SOX requirement of your organization could be different from a control articulation perspective, objective perspective, what your cloud provider may having. So it is very important to see those area, uh, that what is the objective of this control is going to address. Is that align your in-house control? If that is aligned, perfectly okay. If it is not aligned, what is that mismatch and how to address or mitigate that part of this gap? So accordingly, you can take it forward. Over to Saripalli.
Thank you, Dr. Basu. I think we all understand that club world is different, and the responsibilities change, and we need to be aware of these responsibilities basis these services that are being provided, and work collaboratively with the cloud providers in this. So one of the aspects that pretty much everyone on the panel has discussed about is around data privacy. So let me bring you in, Dr. Shan here. Data privacy is a key concern and is often considered a hindrance for organizations to move on to cloud. How do you see data privacy concerns being handled in the cloud, and how do you provide assurance to both your internal business as well as to your consumers on how data is protected?
Good afternoon, everyone. And, glad to see the peers at least hopefully secured beyond options. We come back to the topic where the key consideration when it comes to the process and the procedures, whatever we try to opt or try to use it. In India, there is no single answer to the regulatory, privacy, and security challenges, which creates and builds and raise when it comes to cloud computing. And especially when you see the important steps when you operate globally, especially the customers trying to build from a rural India, we are trying to have something else, to have some 3 steps, which we felt like it's very important and people should apply and try to understand and create that awareness. Understand and comply with various jurisdictional privacy laws, which is very, very important when it comes to data. And we can only understand the risk and obligations when the customer and the legal requirements are properly understood, and it is understood at the local for the jurisdiction where the data originates and where it ends up and trying to it being stored and processed. So please be clear to say, like, understand and comply with various jurisdictional privacy laws, which is first point, which is very important. When you go to second, we have to understand how our cloud provider will protect our data, which is very, very important. Because people talk about public, private, or even a hybrid clouds without getting into that what their business wants, what type of legal issues or what type of customer potential they are trying to use it. So legal trend is disrupting the supply chain of cloud computing by making every one of us accountable for data privacy. But when you define the custodian of the data could be customer, or custodian of the data could be the person who provides information, but not just data of a custodian. It is more to do with even the controller. So understand how to provide the cloud provider, and the cloud provider should have the norms which is part of the data on how he is going to protect our data. Then the third one is what? Explore as much as different encryption technologies and tools which is available and affordable. Today, what happens is what like generally the regulations put something else to say three-factor authentication or specific to some data restriction, which dramatically fails because of the infrastructure. It's not properly available across the country. So try to explore as much as different encryption technologies and tools which is available and affordable at those last mile end user level. The market continues to see as much as wide variety of tools, which is again one completion which is coming to capabilities offered by the security providers. When it comes to hardware, again, hardware is seen more in the expectation of the speed, service, and other mechanisms than encryption. So bring out that as much as available technologies, which is going to do as much to support monolithing and other securing our own information. And the major thing what is coming when it comes to cloud is what? Majority of the cloud offers us more to do with flexible and trying to do affordable softwares. Again, when you try to introduce softwares or platforms as infrastructure as service or try to bring storage available as part of the organizations across all industries, they are all faced with limited budgets. When it comes to budgets, that security is taken more in the terms of when they get heard or the kind of problems they come across. So when you talk about the project should have that increased growth of demands, part of the security, even that work from home today, when you talk about the people getting from the more corporates, very less people have applied the policy process, very less people have taken care of the computing, how it presents the opportunity for organizations to use effectively and secure with reduced costs. So increase of flexibility and improve IT capacity with secured information, data protection, all those things which comes part of the cloud. When you say type of clouds, which generally talks about private cloud, majority people feel like keeping with ourselves or keeping the data with private cloud is more to own from outside. It's more to do with the tools and they provide scalability and self-service, which is proprietary and architecture, which is fully secured with the kind of insights which flows part of the private people coming in trying to use it. When you come across the infrastructure as service, again, the demand and scalable compute storage and networking hosted by the provider is talked, but it's not talked more on saying what type of infrastructure, how the regulators have been defined, and what are the other areas available to take infrastructure as service. Again, taking part of the platform as service, people feel it's more of collection of tools needed for application development hosted by a provider. But it is purely how the monitoring, how the version controls, how the service, how the security environment part of the applications also mentioned and try to get ease out of it. Again, software as a service today, people try to avoid license or try to use it for for a temporary purpose. But application hosted by the provider and consumed by the customers over the internet with the kind of cybersecurity norms and with the kind of information, critical information from the customer and for the corporate is not so well defined. So majority of the areas are coming into trouble when customer starts complaining or people are not having that much awareness the software as service provided. And the last one is the personal cloud. Here the kind of provider hosted capabilities from storage, again the media streaming. So people concentrate more on collaboration and trying to use as much as on the personal accounts. But the personal accounts has a separate ethics when it comes to more of a data privacy and trying to have that how much data, which is very, very critical part of the customer, which should be used, which should be shared, which should be used for share and care. All those elements falls part of it. And surely these things are very much aware from only from the prospect of a secured or a person who knows much about security. But when it comes to business, when it comes to service, or even for the cloud provider, the focus is not so appreciable, which is to be addressed and taken care for a long time.
Thanks, Mr. Shan. I think you've talked about rural India and areas where there's lack of infrastructure. So just wanted to elaborate more on this point, and especially in the current scenario of COVID, where pretty much everyone is working remotely. And remote working sort of has become a norm. And as we are talking to organizations, we see that probably this is there. Remote working is there for a long period of time and it's going to stay with us. So in such a scenario where we see transactions are getting distributed, right? So instead of having one office right now, we have hundreds and thousands of small offices from where people are working. Uh, you know, uh, how do you see technologies like cloud, mobility, IoT, uh, uh, making a presence here, and especially from a cyber standpoint, what are the ways in which to protect these emerging technologies?
It's a great question, and this is the expectations from the people who deploy technology either through IoT or mobility, especially when it comes to again a share and care model where even financial services rely a lot more using the dealers network, brokers networks, where the live information is getting shared part of the custodian of information, where as part of data the review of changing the landscape of privacy and security regulations and requirements is not coping up with the kind of a spread. Like if you see post-COVID and prior to COVID, the kind of regulations which is felt as need and the regulations which is now trying to follow as part of the continue to evolve with our strategy and trying to align part of this end customer. And it is very, very important to bring out as much as regular views part of the society where when you plan as much as cycles for risk and equipped with the IT. The technology alone won't protect us or try to give us as much part of the research. It processes as much as methods which works with multiple technology, which is again consistently evolved based on the requirements and the threat landscape, which is changing faster. In our case, which when we found as much as part of the cloud providers are either used to the kind of latest technologies available and the solutions available, or even they restrict themselves to the versions. Those are the areas now it's coming out very vital and it's more work to be done so that that particular areas can enable and empower us to do migration seamless. Even the legacy information can be transferred just like that and have full secured information which is available 24 by 7. I can still access with all the privilege with as per the regulations and ensure like the rightness of the information which creates the trust. That's what generally financial services we build, which is formed out of the data from both sides, like from the customer and from the corporate. So it's more work to be done, but surely the kind of platform post-COVID has put us and the kind of expectations set part of the customers and the awareness which is coming out very highly with the spread of the rules, regulations, and the GDPR kind of information try to explore as much as towards using it effectively and ensure like it's secured at least at the basic level and trying to use the critical information which is far secured and try to build that service part of the system which is available to the end customers and trying to use the share and care model which is spread across today. The kind of expectation is what the business is going to run through the kind of people who are having technology at the district level and trying to go towards the customer. So the kind of business after post-COVID is what we are currently using corporate digital. This corporate digital is moving towards the customer digital, where every end customer is going to be treated part of the social and try to use of effectivities. So we hope the kind of security which is built for the customer digital so that the customer can easily come out, do transactions with the multiple IoT using mobility kind of the omni channels which connects them and do the business effectively.
Thank you, sir. I especially like the concept of moving from corporate digital to customer digital. I think I'm going to pick up this line and reuse it with your permission. Uh, So, as we see, organizational boundaries becoming less porous, Mr. Batra, you've talked about organizations moving away from DMZ, which was a traditional approach, to microsegmentation and zero trust. How do you see, organizations achieving this in the cloud world?
Sure. I think that is a new word which actually is everyone is using. But if I say zero trust as a concept, it's never been new. So it's a buzzword which I say in the market today. But the very first information security lesson I learned in my life was need to know basis. Okay, least privilege. So anyone who starts their journey in information security, so these are the first two concepts everyone learns. That it should be need to know basis and it should be the least privilege, and that is what is zero trust is all about, right? And you can correlate. So, but in cloud compared to on-prem, cloud makes it quite easy to achieve that zero trust because everything is on software defined and everything you need to have the right skill set to configure the things and the kind of tools or kind of capabilities which cloud has. You can actually, like how Dr. Shah has mentioned about the IoTs or the consumer when they are using, or if you want to segregate your different users, who are, let's say, using finance should not be going to the HR application, or the people who are using marketing application should not be interfering with my IT people's things, or how your zero trust can be built, like how you are entering to your application, how your authentication can happen with using these all security different frameworks, the federal identities and things. It becomes quite easy where you can actually configure, because think of on-prem. If you have two servers and they are not talking to each other, imagining that is quite different in a data center. But in cloud you can have 100 server and 100 of them are not talking to each other, and they are can talking to someone else, something else in the another subnet. That is very much possible with that zero trust kind of environment. And uh, the challenges which have, again I will say, the point when I mentioned, when we are migrating to cloud, do you actually know what all your port application required to talk to another application or another infrastructure? Because for zero trust, defining those rule set is cumbersome process. You can't. It's not that you have put some servers and put some technology which says okay, zero trust is done. It's not like that. When you are coming in, then configuring it, putting the rules, then there are hundreds of rules are required to actually make that thing working. And a single port, so like if you have such 65,000 port, you need to define each and every port, where it will go, where it will connect, and where it should not. Think about that. So tools are there, capabilities are there, but the complexity is quite big, and it required a patience. It required thorough study of your own applications, on your infrastructure, and one way where we are saying we are moving to cloud just for the more functionality, more agility and things, and where we have more wings can be spread, and we can fly, and on the spot we can do some stuff. In that cases, building zero trust is a bit tricky thing, but it's not impossible. Can be achieved. Then only thing is the two principle which we need to have in place: need to know basis and least privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. I think the cloud providers can take your tagline. It's easy to deploy ZPN on cloud. It can be a great sales tagline for them. I think in the interest of time, there are lots of questions that I would like to pose to the panelists, but I think in the interest of time, let me put one last one, and I'll leave it to the panelists to answer. Uh, you know, uh, Major concern for organizations is managing regulatory compliances and reporting on these. So, how do you see compliance measurement and management being done? And also, additionally, more often we are getting to hear about continuous compliance. Being discussed. So how do you see that being evolved from a cloud standpoint? So maybe Mr. Desai, if you could give us your views on this.
Sure. See, the compliance. So, okay. So, before we actually take the compliance as a need or requirement, if we just take a step back, it's about the monitoring. Uh, if we ensure that the monitoring is taken care by design, when the cloud being when the when the cloud strategy being taken care of, or the assessment being taken care of. So monitoring by design. Now you can only monitor, or I would say you can only go take care of the compliance if you have effective monitoring part. Now compliance comes into picture when you have when you have the visibility of each and every aspect. May it be your single endpoint, may it be your data, may it be your various different I would say typical hybrid cloud environment, where you have data maybe in your private cloud, maybe a few applications on the public cloud, maybe you have IaaS, or maybe platform as a service. So if you take holistically all these combined, when you talk about the private or the public or the various forms of the cloud, this one, the single point of visibility that actually takes care, or I would say that actually gives the right platform to then talk about the compliance part. When you say compliance, uh, yeah, again, it actually varies from industry to industry, whether you need to, whether the organizations need to take care of the PCI DSS, or maybe they need to take care of the ISO 27001, or maybe. So it is more about the compliance that is taken care. I'm sure whosoever, so whichever organization falls into that respective category already have those yeah, effective tools to ensure that the compliance is taken care. But then when we effectively talk about the hybrid environment, there are there are actually many challenges. So data, right, I would say monitoring data, getting into a single platform, or I would say while we have some fantastic cloud service providers, but they, so the challenges starts when they have their I would say their isolate tools, where they provide effective tools to only monitor those part of the data. So we need solutions. So we need to, so while again going back to the basics of cloud strategy, the monitoring and the effectiveness should be as a part of the design aspect, and need to ensure that you have a solution which is more which lies on the top of your current or your legacy, maybe SIMs, or maybe your monitoring tools. So this needs to, so there needs to a solution which rides on top of each of your either the cloud service provider tools, or your legacy SIMs, or your basic monitoring tools and tackles.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. So let me reach out to you, Mr. Batra. Any thoughts on how continuous compliance can be enabled?
Yes, I'll agree with Keyur's point, like, how these compliances are
Hello.
working these days, but I will like to bring on the other
Yeah, yeah,
aspect
I'm
of
in the
it. So if
panel.
you
I
we
finished
see
and
the
joined.
traditional, okay, so how an application or
Yeah, yeah.
things work, like, you plan for a project, you plan for an application, you develop that, you build it, and then you test and go for compliances check that if it matches with the my regulatory or compliance things or not. So that those are the things, but that is a traditional process which monitoring and things are happening. But with cloud, when you are moving, so the very is, you can which can support your DevOps as well as the agile environment and continuous monitoring of the compliance as a code, which I think is still in the developing phase. People are working on it, but what it gives you is, like, initially in the interim phase you can have some guardrail rules that, before even you go for an application live, you just met your criteria of compliances and then go. But to support the DevOps, so the compliance as a code thing, before you start a project, first you work on compliances. Like if I'm a banking sector or I'm into something, what all compliance need to follow. So those compliances are built as a part of a code and put it into your system that you're developing. And if it is going against your compliance, it will not, let you move forward. So you have to fix there in, there out. So like, building, developing, and then testing compliance and then reversing the process is going slowly. So it will be, compliance will be become the prime thing, where everything from compliance will be made as a code, deployed, and whenever your project or application is started working in the DevOps environment, that will automatically sync up and see if it is going to compliance, and you will not even able to build the thing which is out of compliance. So those are the few things, and I think if that happens, so most of the auditor and compliance jobs are also at risk. one point, but the thing is, it's not that easy to achieve. Which things like seems like, but right now I will say even me, other everywhere, what Keyur has mentioned, that smooth monitoring and compliance at a second thought, or after the development where people are mapping it, is gonna be a long way, but compliance and code is the future, which may take some time to build in and start working on. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Batra. And I think you are very right. Jobs are at risk, and we are reskilling ourselves to see how we can move towards compliance as code, right? I think
Coding today.
absolutely. So some wonderful thoughts coming out of the discussion. We've covered a lot of topics today, right from cybersecurity, pre-migration to cloud. We've talked about having knowledge about what assets to move, complete inventory of what to move, having a proper planning for migration. We've talked about how architecture assessment is very critical, how entire controls design and efficiency measurement is something that needs to be properly planned and followed through in a structured way. We've covered about data privacy and how assurance can be provided to consumers in a distributed transactions model. How these can be facilitated through emerging technologies, yet protected in a proper manner. Right? And we've talked about compliance and regulatory measurements. How and one of the aspects that I really like is effective compliance can be ensured through effective monitoring, and I think that's a key message coming out of the discussion as well. So thank you very much for the wonderful conversation and the insights that have come through.